was 6 years old.
Hi, U.S. history. How are you? Not as sunny of a week as we had last week, but hope this video finds you well. We have a wonderful lecture. It's probably one of my favorite lectures of the year. And so today we're going to talk about the Berlin airlift during the Cold War. So we have a lecture today, and then we have a worksheet that you can do either while I lecture, or you can watch this lecture through, which is what I would recommend. And then I would then kind of fill out the worksheet and maybe go back to the lecture if you need to, okay? So that's how I'd approach today. Listening to a little Ed Sheeran today. I'll come back to this song here in a little bit. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with this lecture. I love this lecture, so if I get a little excited, I'm sorry. But we're going to talk about the Berlin airlift. Again, this still goes with your notes of the effects of the growing tension between the US and USSR. And this is kind of the straw that breaks the camel's back in terms of solidifying that the US and the USSR are not friends. So this is one of the major effects of that growing tension between the US and USSR after World War II ends. So let's go ahead and start. So basically, Germany is falling apart when the Nazis when they surrender and the Soviet Union comes into Germany and the Allied powers of Britain and France and the United States come into Germany, Germany is done. And now the question is, what do we do with Germany? What do we do with them? I mean, after World War I, we let them try and figure things out, and look what happened. So we've got to make sure that Germany follows the right path so we don't lead into another world war caused by Germany. And so what they do is they divide Germany into 4 parts amongst the 4 winners of World War II. So right here, the red part, that's going to be the Soviet Union's. The green part, that's going to be Great Britain's. The blue part, smaller part, because France, they helped as much as they could, but they were taken over by the Nazis, so they get a little bit less of a portion. That's France, the blue part. And then the yellow part, which my video is hiding, is the US. Okay, so they decide, we're going to divide Germany into 4 parts. We could go ahead and just govern those parts and help Germany get back on its feet, or we can do whatever we want with it. So that was decided at the Potsdam Conference, where Stalin and Churchill and Truman all met to kind of figure out, and de Gaulle all met to figure out what to do with Germany. In addition to dividing Germany, though, we're going to divide the capital of Berlin the same way. So if you look right here, here's Berlin, deep into the Soviet portion. But you can see there's a little bit of blue, a little bit of green, and a little bit of yellow. We're going to divide Berlin also into 4 different parts. Soviet gets the red, France gets the blue, England gets the green, and the United States gets the yellow. You're dividing a city. Imagine that. Imagine Denver being divided into 4 different parts to be governed by 4 different countries. That's a little weird, right? Well, the Soviet Union knows that, hey, this is all good. If everybody governs their own part, we're good. But if you 3, France, Great Britain, and the United States, decide to make your parts 1, that's not fair. It's going to be 3 against 1. Because you guys all have that democracy and capitalism thing going. We have communism. So if you guys decide to merge your zones together in here, it's going to be like 3 against 1. And if you decide to merge your zones here in Berlin together, it's going to be 3 against 1. And what really is going to happen is you guys are going to force us out, and the Soviet Union's only going to get maybe this little red spot in this whole deal. And that's crap, because we are the ones, according to the USSR, that they were the ones that fought the hardest to get Germany back under control. And they did. We didn't open up that Western Front for a while. So they sacrificed much more, and they don't want to lose that land just because we kind of gang up. So the USSR kind of protests what happened here. They don't feel that these other powers, Great Britain, France, and the US, should have any control in Berlin. Berlin is in their territory. They should get all control of Berlin. And of course, France, the US, and the British are like, no. So the USSR protests this. And what they do is they cut off supplies to the people of Berlin that are in these areas, in the French, British, and US areas. And they basically cut off food supplies from going in, kind of like a protest saying, hey, US, France, Great Britain, if you don't give us all of Berlin, we're going to starve those people. And you're going to seem like a bad, bad person if you let people starve. So, oh my gosh, what do? We're getting strong-armed by the USSR. So, in protest of that zone agreement made by the USSR, they blocked all of the routes between Western Germany and Berlin to get complete control of Berlin. That's the idea behind the Soviets trying to get control of all of Berlin. Okay. All right. So what do? You can't let the USSR win this little battle. Like, that's not cool. We're in a Cold War, meaning that, we don't want them to think that they've got the upper hand on the US, Great Britain, and France. So, in June of 1948, June 25th, the Soviet Union is starving the people of Berlin just to get their way to control all of Berlin. And we say, nah. So what we're going to do is we're going to fly planes in, British planes, US planes. We're going to fly these planes in, and they're going to drop food into Berlin. They're going to drop crates of food on parachutes that drop nicely down so they don't squish anybody. But they're going to drop food in, and that's what's going to feed these West Berliners. Well, okay, fine. So the Soviet Union's like, fine, go ahead, do that. You can't keep this up. We're just going to cut off these West Berliners, and you're going to have to keep this up for years if you want to keep control of this portion of Berlin. So we start in June of 1948, and we call it Operation Vittles, like, food being victuals. We call it Operation Vittles. And we start using planes like these planes that basically are bombers. So at any point, maybe we're not dropping food. And so the Soviet Union has to consider, are they willing to almost start war over this? And this continues for a year almost. It lasts until May of 1949. And at one point, we are bringing in every 45 seconds, a plane is coming in and dropping in food for the West Berliners. And it basically proved to the USSR that we could keep this up for years. Like, you're not intimidating us. We're going to keep feeding these people. We're going to keep looking like the good guys. You guys are going to look like the bad guys. And we could do this for years. Just test us. Keep going. And we are. We're feeding a number of thousands of people between France, Great Britain, and the United States, bringing in planes and dropping down food for them. And Finally, the USSR goes, fine, you win. And so this is our first big victory of the Cold War. And now this isn't a war that we were fighting like bang, 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 shoot at each other. This is a war of wills, okay? Who can last longer? And we proved we could feed these people of West Berlin by air for a year. And so this is a huge victory. And because of this victory, what we get is the division of Germany into two parts, okay? So what we get is here, all right, we have West Germany that is going to be created as a country. And here, we're going to call this, the Russian part, East Germany. And right here in Berlin, we're going to divide Berlin right in half between the western side and the eastern side, okay? And this is the Berlin Wall, all right? This is the beginnings of the Berlin Wall. This is how the Berlin Wall ends up getting made, is we have Berlin is going to be divided into the democracy side, and East Berlin is going to be into the communist side. So the city of Berlin in itself, located in East Germany, will be part democracy, part communist, right? So we get the creation of East and West Germany also as countries. And because of this wall, they will actually build an actual wall known as the Berlin Wall. And at first, it starts off just as barbed wire fence, dividing the two sides of Berlin, the western side and the eastern side, or the western side, the democracy side, and the eastern side, the communist side. And Winston Churchill says a very famous quote, "An iron curtain has descended across the continent," meaning that we are now dividing Europe into two sides, democracy and capitalism and communist sides. And of course, this actual wall will be a wall that becomes a cement wall that will be over, I believe it was over 12 feet high and about 3 feet thick. And people were literally divided. Families were literally divided. Some would end up being stuck on the communist side, and some would be stuck on the democracy side. If you tried to go from the communist side to the democracy side, if you tried to go from East Berlin to West Berlin, you could be shot. Nobody tried to go from West Berlin to East Berlin to the communist side. Nobody tried to go from the democracy to the communist side, but people would try and run over to be with family into the West Berlin side, and sometimes they would be shot. Once this wall was built of the Berlin Wall, it was a lot harder to try and escape the eastern side of Berlin. Okay. And that wall would stay up from 1961. So the barbed wire wall would stay into place since 1949. And then in 1961, they would build an actual concrete wall, and that wall would stay up until 1989. Okay. When the end of the Cold War will happen in 1989. Now, just months before the Berlin airlift actually finishes, we create an organization called NATO. It's called the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It was made in 1949, and this will be an alliance between countries that says, if you attack one of us, it's like an attack against all of us. So if somebody attacks France, all of these countries are going to come to France's rescue. That's what NATO is. It's an alliance system. So 12 nations started off in NATO. It'll, of course, get bigger and bigger over time during this Cold War. But 12 nations, Britain, Belgium, Luxembourg, Netherlands, the United States, Canada, Italy, Portugal, Denmark, Norway, Iceland, Greece, and Turkey. Sorry, my phone just went off. Greece and Turkey will join in 1952 because they are starting to build their country back from that, from getting the money from the Truman Doctrine and the Marshall Plan. And West Germany, once it becomes a country, once it kind of gets back on its feet economically in 1955. So what we see, let me just turn off my phone. So what we see is NATO will continue to grow, and this is countries that are democracies and practice capitalism. You don't need to write all of these names of these countries, okay, into your notes. The Soviet Union, just like when the US developed the CIA, the Soviet Union developed the KGB, the Soviet Union's answer to NATO would be called the Warsaw Pact. It was established in 1955. It will include places like, under Soviet control, Soviet Union, Poland, East Germany. Okay, those are going to be the countries that say kind of the same thing. If you attack one of us, it's like attack against all of us. All right, so these are the alliances during the Cold War. This is the worksheet, the DICE assignment worksheet that you had assigned for Monday. And that's why we did it, so you can start to see these two different alliances. Okay, guys, so that is the end of my lecture. Your job now is to go into the document that we have as a DICE assignment, and your job is to kind of do like we did with the worksheet with the alliances as soon as it loads. Your job is to take a look at the diagram that I had on one of my slides that shows how Germany was initially divided between the four different powers, between Britain, the United States, France, and the USSR. Tell me who controlled which section by labeling it with the correct letter. Okay. Then also fill in a couple of quick notes. What was the Berlin airlift? Quickly describe what that airlift was. Was it necessary? Was this a necessary thing that happened? And what was the result? You're welcome to use this lecture. I'll also have a link into Schoology for a reading you can do if you didn't get enough information from my lecture. It's a short reading that you can look through and get the answers there if you decide to do that. All right. So guys, that's it for today. I'm going to leave us and kind of fade out with Ed Sheeran's Castle on the Hill. When I first heard this song was when I first moved back to Eagle County. And this song so just reminds me of why I came home, especially when I look at Castle Peak. So guys, have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you on Monday. Watch the sunset.